What happens when a man worth $40 million looks straight at Judge Frank Caprio and acts like the law is just another employee on his payroll? Drop a comment telling us what you think the judge said that made an entire courtroom go silent, because one word changed everything that morning in Providence. Before this story is over, arrogance will crack, buried pain will surface, and justice will arrive in a way nobody in that room expected. Hit that subscribe button if you believe money should never matter more than basic decency. Like this video, if you've ever seen someone with power assume the rules were written for everybody else. And share this with someone who needs to see what real accountability looks like when it finally walks into the room wearing a custom suit and a smile that thinks it can buy its way out. It was Tuesday, October 17, 2023, 9:14 in the morning, and the air inside Providence Municipal Court felt colder than usual. The old radiator along the side wall hissed like it had something to say. Papers shuffled. Shoes squeaked against worn tile. A clerk named Diane Marino, 61 years old, silver bob cut, reading glasses on a chain, called case number PM 2344718 in the same steady voice she had used for nearly 3 decades. Then he stood up. Sebastian Vale, 43 years old, founder of Vale Meridian Capital, owner of 3 waterfront properties, a private membership box at Fenway, and according to the Providence Business Journal, a net worth somewhere between $38 and $42 million depending on the quarter. He wore a midnight blue Brioni suit that looked pressed by physics, a white Turnbull and Acer shirt, a dark burgundy tie, and a Patek Philippe Nautilus that flashed every time he moved his wrist. The kind of man who never just entered a room, he arrived. Even before he spoke, people noticed the details. The cufflinks, the polished Ferragamo loafers, the sharp line of contempt around his mouth, the expensive winter coat folded over his arm even though it was only October. Outside, parked illegally for just a little too long near a loading zone, was the same black 2024 Bentley Flying Spur that had gotten photographed twice by local parking enforcement in the previous 6 months. Sebastian had the look of someone who believed inconvenience was something that happened to poorer people. The gallery that morning was full of ordinary lives. A plumber contesting a meter ticket, a nursing student named Keisha Brown hoping a moving violation wouldn't spike her insurance, an elderly veteran with hearing aids and a paper bag of prescriptions, a mother bouncing a toddler on her knee. They all turned to look at Sebastian the way people do when arrogance enters before the body does. Like this video if you already know the type. The kind of person who thinks confidence and contempt are the same thing. Drop a comment telling us whether you think people like that are born that way, or whether success slowly teaches them they can stop listening. Judge Caprio looked up from the file in front of him, calm eyes, hands folded, navy robe sitting naturally on his shoulders like it had grown there. He didn't rush. He never rushed. That was part of his power. In a room where everybody else carried their panic like loose glass, he was the one steady object. "Mr. Vale," he said. Sebastian stepped forward with his attorney, Niles Kessler, a narrow-faced defense lawyer in a charcoal suit and rimless glasses. Kessler carried a leather portfolio thick with motions, printed photographs, and what looked like a packet of charitable donation records. That alone made a few people in the back exchange glances. Donation records for a municipal court citation. The citation sounded simple when Diane read it aloud. Obstruction of an emergency access lane. Failure to obey direct instruction from an officer. Unlawful standing in a marked emergency zone outside Providence Memorial Medical Center on the night of June 22, 2023, at approximately 6:42 p.m. Most people in that courtroom expected a short hearing, a fine, a little embarrassment, maybe a lecture. But everyone in the room was about to learn this was not a parking case. It started as one. That was the part Sebastian kept repeating to anybody who would listen. It's a parking case. He had said it to his attorney. He had said it to the clerk's office twice on the phone. He had said it to his executive assistant, Brooke Delaney, in an email later entered into evidence. "It is a parking case. This should be handled by lunch." Handled by lunch. Those three words had a way of curdling when people heard them. Because on June 22, Providence Memorial wasn't just another building on another street. It was where a 14-year-old girl named Lily Chen arrived in the back of an ambulance gasping for air so violently that the medic inside later described the sound as trying to breathe through a locked door. It was where a cafeteria supervisor, Edmaria Santos, 58, rushed toward the entrance when she heard yelling outside and slipped on rain-dark pavement while trying to hold open a side emergency door. It was where EMT Jamal Green, 32, wrenched his lower back, helping move a stretcher farther than protocol required, because the designated lane was blocked by a glossy black Bentley with vanity plates that read Vale 1. And when the officer on scene ordered the car moved, Sebastian Vale did not apologize. He laughed. Hit subscribe if you believe laughter can tell you everything about a person's character. Because the second you hear what he said next, you'll understand why this became one of those courtroom moments nobody who saw it could ever forget. Officer Elena Ruiz was sworn in first, 36 years old, Providence Police, 7 years on patrol, 3 years in traffic enforcement before returning to field response, dark hair in a tight bun, face composed. She had that specific posture good officers have when they know the facts are enough and they don't need to decorate the truth. Caprio asked her to describe the scene. "It was raining lightly," Ruiz said. "Not a downpour, enough to make the pavement slick. I arrived at Providence Memorial Medical Center's emergency intake lane at approximately 6:43 p.m. in response to a call about a vehicle stopped in a red-striped emergency access zone. When I arrived, I observed a black Bentley Flying Spur positioned across approximately 2/3 of the marked ambulance unload area. Were emergency markings visible?" "Yes, Your Honor, bright red curb, white letters, vertical signage, no standing, emergency vehicles only." Kessler leaned forward. "Officer, is it true there were other vehicles present in the general vicinity?" "In the general vicinity, yes," Ruiz said evenly. "In the ambulance lane, no." Sebastian exhaled through his nose with theatrical boredom. Judge Caprio noticed. He always noticed. "Mr. Vale," he said softly, "this isn't the theater. Please don't perform for the room." A low murmur moved through the gallery. Tiny, almost nothing, but Sebastian's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being corrected in public, especially not by someone old enough to do it without raising his voice. Officer Ruiz continued. She explained that hospital staff had already attempted to locate the driver. A valet attendant from the Bell and Harbor Hotel across the street had said the owner would only be 5 minutes. The 5 minutes had already stretched to 23. By the time Ruiz arrived, an incoming ambulance had been radioed 2 minutes out. "What happened then?" Caprio asked. Ruiz turned one page in her notebook. "The ambulance arrived while the Bentley remained in place. Because the lane was obstructed, the ambulance had to stop farther back. Medical personnel had to unload the patient in a less direct route to the intake door. There was confusion. Hospital staff, security, and medics were all attempting to clear a path." "And the driver?" Ruiz looked straight ahead. "The driver approached while I was directing the ambulance." She didn't add emotion to the sentence. She didn't need to. "And what did he say?" Caprio asked. Ruiz answered with the same tone she might use to recite weather. "He said, 'This better be quick.'" The silence that followed was not empty. It had weight. In the back row, the mother with the toddler stopped bouncing. The plumber's mouth opened slightly. Diane Marino's pen stopped moving for half a second before she resumed taking notes. Even Niles Kessler shifted uncomfortably. Sebastian adjusted his tie. "That's incomplete," he said. Caprio turned his head, just enough to look at him. "You'll have your turn." That was when people leaned in. Because if you've watched enough courtroom stories, you know there's a point where a hearing stops being about a violation and starts becoming a revelation. Everyone in that room could feel it coming. Drop a comment telling us the exact moment you think Sebastian should have realized this case was slipping out of his hands. Was it when Officer Ruiz said the words emergency lane? Was it when the room went quiet after his comment? Or was it still too early for a man like that to understand consequence? Kessler tried to regain control. He introduced photographs taken later that night showing the Bentley's rear bumper not completely crossing the full width of the striped zone. He stressed there had been some possible ambiguity in loading area boundaries. He noted Sebastian was attending a fundraising dinner at the Bell and Harbor benefiting pediatric respiratory research. He emphasized his client had pledged $200,000 to the hospital's children's wing that evening. There it was, the money, the shield. Kessler was careful not to sound crude, but the implication entered the room anyway. This was a donor, a benefactor, a man whose name had appeared on gala programs and building plaques. Surely that counted for something. Hing. Judge Caprio looked down at the photograph, then back at the officer. "Officer Ruiz," he asked, "did the ambulance have to alter its unloading procedure because of this vehicle?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did the officer on scene direct the vehicle owner to move immediately?" "Yes." "Did he comply immediately?" Ruiz paused one beat. "No, Your Honor." Caprio set the photo down. "Then the angle of the bumper is not the heart of this case." That line landed. You could feel it move across the room like a draft. But the real turn came when Prosecutor Daniel Walsh stood up and asked permission to introduce hospital surveillance footage, body camera excerpts, and 3 impact statements. Sebastian frowned for the first time. Not angry, not yet, just inconvenienced. Because now it sounded bigger than lunch. The first video played on an overhead monitor fixed to the front corner of the room, grainy but clear enough. Black and white hospital surveillance from camera E4 overlooking emergency intake. Timestamp: 6/22/23/18/41/16. The Bentley slid into frame like it belonged there. Sleek hood, headlights reflecting off wet concrete. It rolled straight past a visible red curb, paused and stopped with the lazy certainty of a man who had never been meaningfully challenged by a painted line. A valet in a maroon jacket approached from the sidewalk, gesturing toward another space. The driver's side door opened. A man in a tailored dinner jacket stepped out. Even in monochrome, the body language was unmistakable. Sebastian Vale. The valet pointed again. Sebastian shook his head. The court had no audio on the surveillance clip, but Officer Ruiz had already given context. She testified the valet later reported telling Sebastian that the zone was reserved for ambulances and that the nearby loading area for the hotel was around the corner on Benefit Street. The next clip filled in the missing sound. Body camera, Officer Ruiz arriving, rain ticking on pavement, the faint wail of a siren in the distance. "You need to move the vehicle now," Ruiz said on the recording. Sebastian's voice came back smooth, irritated, almost amused. "I'm literally here for 5 minutes." "You were told that already, sir. Move it now." Then came a second siren, closer. And Sebastian said the line that made even Kessler close his eyes for a fraction of a second. "If an ambulance comes, they can go around." A gasp broke from somewhere near the middle row. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through everything. Sebastian turned his head toward the gallery, almost offended that people were reacting to him. Then he looked back at the screen, as if maybe hearing his own voice had surprised him. As if he had expected his words to sound smarter in court than they had sounded in the rain. Like this video, if you believe some sentences reveal the soul in a single breath. If an ambulance comes, they can go around. That one line told the room more about Sebastian Vale than any balance sheet ever could. But the footage was not done. The ambulance appeared 31 seconds later, lights washing the wet pavement in violent pulses of blue and red. It had to stop at an awkward angle because the Bentley occupied the clean approach. EMT Jamal Green and paramedic Priya Desai stepped out fast, backs bent, movements practiced, but you could see the hesitation. Not confusion from inexperience. Confusion from obstruction. Hospital security came running. A nurse in purple scrubs flung an arm toward the side entry. A woman in cafeteria whites rushed into frame from the left. Maria Santos. She pulled at the emergency door, bracing it with her hip as the medic steered the stretcher around the Bentley's nose instead of directly up the lane. The stretcher wheel clipped the edge of a curb ramp. Maria twisted, lost her footing, and disappeared out of frame. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Oh my God." The footage cut. And suddenly, everybody understood why a municipal case had become a packed courtroom hearing. Caprio let the silence sit. He knew silence could do work words never could. Then he asked Walsh to proceed. The first impact statement belonged to Jamal Green. Jamal was present in the courtroom, broad-shouldered, left hand resting against the back support he still sometimes used on long shifts. He wore a simple navy quarter zip, EMT insignia embroidered on the chest. He was sworn in and took the stand. His voice was controlled, but there was steel underneath it. "I've worked emergency response for 9 years," he said. "You train for bad weather. You train for bad traffic. You train for panic. What you don't train for is somebody deciding their convenience outranks the lane that keeps people alive." He described Lily Chen's condition when they picked her up from her family's apartment on Wickenden Street. Severe asthma exacerbation, oxygen saturation falling, retractions visible at the neck, panic making the airway worse, rainy air not helping. Her mother, May Chen, cry. Ing in the front seat, but trying not to let her daughter see it. "We needed the shortest route from vehicle to intake," Jamal said. "That's what the lane is for. Every extra second matters because every extra second the body is working harder to survive." "Did the obstruction delay care?" Walsh asked. "Yes." "By how much?" Jamal didn't exaggerate. The exact documented delay between arrival and transfer across the intake threshold was 1 minute and 48 seconds, beyond our normal window for that bay. 1 minute and 48 seconds. It sounded tiny until Jamal explained what it felt like. In emergency medicine, a minute can be the difference between distress and collapse. Kessler stood for cross-examination and tried the obvious move. "Mr. Green, Lily Chen survived, correct?" The courtroom changed temperature. Jamal looked at him, the way firefighters look at people who ask whether the smoke was really a problem since the house didn't fully burn down. "She survived," Jamal said. "That doesn't mean the delay didn't matter." Then he leaned slightly toward the microphone. "And if you've ever watched a child try to breathe and wondered whether she's going to make it to the next second, you don't ask that question so casually." That was the first quote of the morning people would repeat later in barbershops, group chats, and family dinners. Sebastian rolled his eyes. Not dramatically, just enough. And Judge Caprio saw it. He saw everything. He asked Jamal one question himself. "What stays with you from that night?" Jamal took a breath. "The sound, Your Honor, not the siren, the girl trying to pull air in and not getting enough. You hear that once, you never forget it." The room stayed still. Then Walsh called Maria Santos. Maria walked carefully. She wore a cream cardigan over a floral blouse, hospital ID still clipped to her pocket as if she had come straight from work. Her right wrist brace was skin-colored and discreet, but noticeable once you saw it. She had kind eyes that had probably forgiven too many people in her life. That morning, though, she looked more tired than kind. She had worked at Providence Memorial for 27 years, started in dishwashing, moved to food prep, then cafeteria supervisor. Her husband, Victor Santos, was on dialysis 3 times a week. Their younger son, Louis, had just started community college. Maria took overtime whenever she could. On the stand, she described hearing the raised voices outside. She ran because in a hospital everyone runs towards certain sounds. A scream, a code, the rough edge of panic. I saw the ambulance stopped wrong, she said. You know when you work there long enough, you know how things are supposed to look. That didn't look right. She hurried to hold a door for the medics. Her shoes slipped on the wet concrete. She hit the frame with her shoulder and went down hard. Hospital records later documented a grade 2 AC joint sprain in her shoulder and a non-displaced fracture in her right wrist. What was the consequence of those injuries? Walsh asked. I missed 11 shifts, Maria said. I lost overtime. My husband missed one dialysis ride because I couldn't drive him that day, and we had to wait for my cousin. Her voice caught for the first time. I'm not saying that to make it dramatic. That's just what happened. Then Walsh asked a question, so simple it felt brutal. Did Mr. Vale ever ask if you were all right? Maria looked at Sebastian. No. That one word had its own sting. Share this with someone who still believes small acts of selfishness only affect one person, because by now this wasn't one blocked lane. It was a child, an EMT, a hospital worker, a husband on dialysis, a whole chain of people bent around one man's impatience. Kessler tried to soften it. He suggested Maria's slip might have been caused by the rain alone. He asked whether she could say with certainty that, absent the Bentley, she would not have fallen. Maria answered in the same plain voice she used for everything. If the lane had been clear, I would have been standing somewhere else. That was quote number 2. Then came Mei Chen. She was 39, a high school algebra teacher, hair pulled back tight as if she had no spare energy left for appearance. She sat down, clasped her hands, unclasped them and tried to begin. The first words barely came out. My daughter has had asthma since she was 6. Lily wasn't in the courtroom. Judge Caprio had allowed her written statement instead because she still got anxious around medical settings. May described June 22 in detail. Lily had been studying for a summer music program audition. She played violin. That afternoon the humidity changed. Construction dust from the building across the street came through a cracked kitchen window, and by 6 o'clock Lily's rescue inhaler wasn't enough. Her lips had started to blue at the edges. May called 911 at 6:18 p.m. In the ambulance, Lily was conscious but frightened. She kept asking whether she would miss the audition. That broke something in the room because children in crisis ask the most human questions. Not am I dying, but will normal life still be there if I survive this? When May described the ambulance stopping short because of the car in the lane, she pressed her fingers hard together until the knuckles whitened. I remember seeing that black car, she said. It looked so polished, so expensive. I remember thinking someone must already be moving it because no one would leave that there if they knew. Then I heard arguing and I realized they knew. Walsh asked what she felt in that moment. Anger first, May said. Then fear. Then a kind of disbelief that I can't explain. The kind where your mind says this can't be real because it would mean someone chose to matter more than your child. Nobody moved. Even Sebastian's attorney stared at the table. Caprio thanked her gently. He always knew exactly when to cut off a moment before it turned into spectacle. Then he looked at Sebastian. Do you wish to speak now, or shall your attorney continue? Sebastian stood before Kessler could answer. He buttoned his jacket, small move, control move. With respect, Your Honor, this has spiraled into a morality play over a parking dispute. The words landed badly. He didn't seem to know that yet. No one is minimizing anyone's experience, he continued. though that was exactly what he was doing. But this is selective outrage. I attended a fundraiser for that very hospital that night. I have donated to pediatric respiratory care. I have funded actual beds, actual equipment, actual treatment. The idea that I'm being painted as some kind of villain because of a brief stop is absurd. There it was again, brief stop. He went on. I did not touch anyone. I did not instruct anyone to ignore medical personnel. And with all due respect, if we're going to pretend 1 minute and 48 seconds created every hardship described here, then we're not dealing in facts. We're dealing in emotion. That was the moment people started disliking him for more than the car. Because arrogance is one thing. Cold arithmetic applied to other people's pain is something worse. Judge Caprio didn't interrupt. He let Sebastian spend rope. Sebastian lifted one hand slightly. I'm sorry anyone had a difficult evening. Truly. But if this city wants people like me investing in it, supporting institutions, writing checks when public funding falls short, then maybe don't drag them through a public shaming ritual over an overblown citation. The room didn't gasp this time. It hardened. Because everybody in there had heard some version of that sentence before, maybe not with the same polish, but the message was old. I help enough. I pay enough. I matter enough. Therefore, I should be exempt from ordinary limits. Like this video, if you think the second somebody says, people like me, they've already told you exactly who they are. Caprio folded his hands. Mr. Vale, he said, do you believe charitable giving purchases a different standard of conduct? Sebastian answered too quickly, no, of course not. Then why raise your donations as a defense? Kessler jumped in. Your Honor, my client is only providing context regarding his relationship with the institution and his intent that evening. Caprio nodded once. I understand. The court will consider intent. It will also consider consequence. That sentence didn't sound dramatic. It sounded worse. It sounded final. Walsh rose again. Your Honor, the city has additional evidence concerning events after the incident. Sebastian's head turned sharply. That was new. Walsh introduced 3 exhibits: an internal hospital security report, a phone log from Providence Memorial Administration, and an email chain from Sebastian Vale's office sent the morning after the incident. Kessler objected immediately. Foundation, relevance, prejudice. Caprio overruled with limited scope. I'll hear it. Walsh called Brooke Delaney. If Sebastian Vale entered the courtroom like a man used to causing motion, Brooke entered like someone trying not to be noticed at all. 31. Executive assistant for Vale Meridian Capital for 4 years. Navy sheath dress, tan blazer, flats too practical for the rest of the room. She kept pressing her thumbnail against the seam of her notepad. She was sworn in. Ms. Delaney, Walsh said, did you work for Mr. Vale on June 22 and June 23 of last year? Yes. Did you have communications with hospital administration after the incident outside Providence Memorial? Brooke swallowed, yes. Kessler objected again. Caprio allowed the question. Walsh put the email on the monitor. From Brooke Delaney to Sebastian Vale. Timestamped 8:06 a.m. June 23. Subject line PMH issue. The body read, security has preserved footage. Admin says officer's report is already filed. I can call Martin if you want, but this doesn't look easy to bury. A current of sound moved. Through the courtroom, barely audible, but there. Walsh looked up. Who is Martin? Martin Feld, Brooke said. Vice President for External Affairs at the hospital. And did Mr. Vale instruct you to contact him? Brooke hesitated. Ms. Delaney, Caprio said, and his tone held no threat, only gravity. You are under oath. Yes, Brooke said quietly, he did. What did he instruct you to say? Brooke's eyes flicked once toward Sebastian. He stared back so hard it looked like pressure. He said to tell Martin the whole thing had become a misunderstanding and needed to be smoothed out before reporters got hold of it. Walsh advanced to the next email. From Sebastian Vale to Brooke, 8:11 a.m. Same subject line, one sentence. Nobody says no to me in my own city. This time the gasp was collective. Sebastian straightened. That's rhetoric, private frustration, it proves nothing. But Brooke wasn't done. Walsh asked if there were further instructions. Brooke nodded. He wanted me to get the valet to say the signage wasn't visible in the rain, and he wanted to know whether the officer had body cam running. Kessler objected on hearsay grounds, but the damage was already done. Not because every word would survive formal evidentiary scrutiny in a higher court, but because the emotional truth had flooded the room. It wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a pattern. A decision, then a second decision, then a third. Everyone in the room knew the case had changed. This was no longer just about a lane being blocked. It was about whether a man with money had tried to lean on institutions after his own behavior injured ordinary people. And that's when Sebastian made the choice that truly sealed his image in the minds of everybody watching. He laughed again. Short, bitter, disbelieving. "Brooke," he said, "you're doing this because you left my firm under unpleasant circumstances." She blinked. "I left because you asked me to lie." The line hit like a hammer. That was quote number 3. Sebastian's face changed. Not humility, not yet, just the first hairline crack in certainty. Judge Caprio turned to him. "Mr. Vale, you will not address witnesses directly." Sebastian held his hands apart. "So she gets to come in here and recite office gossip while I sit here like some cartoon villain." "No," Caprio said, "she gets to testify." Every few minutes the room seemed to remember how to breathe, then forgot again. Drop a comment if you think Brooke Delaney was the moment the whole case turned. Because when insiders start telling the truth, power loses the shadows it usually hides inside. Walsh had more. He read from the hospital security report. At 6:47 p.m., while EMTs were maneuvering around the Bentley, the vehicle owner allegedly told valet supervisor Noah Price, "Touch my car and I'll own your week." That statement was later partially corroborated by Noah, who submitted a written affidavit but was out of state on military reserve duty and unavailable in person. Walsh also introduced the hospital administration phone log. At 9:22 a.m. the next day, Martin Feld received 2 calls from Brooke Delaney and 1 from Sebastian Vale's direct office line. At 9:31 a.m., Feld noted in the log, "Caller implied future philanthropy may be affected by how the incident is characterized." Kessler objected again, and again Caprio admitted the evidence only for what it suggested, not as proven extortion. But the room didn't need legal perfection to grasp the shape of the behavior. Sebastian had tried to convert generosity into leverage. That wasn't charity, that was bargaining. Kessler now did what good lawyers do when facts go sour. He shifted to humanizing. He called Sebastian himself to the stand. This was a risk, everybody knew it, but maybe it was all he had left. Sebastian swore to tell the truth. For the first time all morning, he looked slightly less polished, not disheveled, not broken, just irritated that the room refused to align with the version of reality he preferred. Kessler began softly. "Mr. Vale, where were you headed on June 22? "To the Bell in Harbor Ballroom." "For what purpose?" "A pediatric respiratory fundraiser." "Had you pledged financial support that evening?" "Yes." "How much?" $200,000. "Were you attempting to interfere with emergency care?" "Absolutely not." "Did you believe your vehicle would cause harm?" "No." "What did you think when the officer approached?" Sebastian exhaled. I thought the whole thing was escalating unnecessarily. I thought I was stepping inside for a few minutes. I was late. I made a bad parking decision. That is the truth. Better, cleaner, more reasonable. Kessler saw the opening and took it. Did you ever intend disrespect toward hospital staff, police, or the patient in that ambulance? No. Did you intend to injure Miss Santos? Of course not. Did you intend to delay treatment for Lily Chen? No. Kessler sat down, hoping intent could compete with impact. Then Walsh stood for Cross. Mr. Vale, he said, you heard Officer Ruiz testify that she told you to move immediately. Yes. Did you? Not instantly, no. Why not? I was speaking to the valet. While an ambulance approached, I did not understand how close it was. Walsh pressed a button. The body cam audio filled the room again. Siren, louder now, impossible to miss. You still maintain that? Sebastian swallowed. It was a chaotic moment. Walsh took one step closer. Did you say, if an ambulance comes, they can go around? A pause. Yes, in frustration. Did you say it? Yes. Did you try to have the incident buried the next morning? No. Walsh displayed the email. Sebastian stared at his own words. Nobody says no to me in my own city. That email reflects anger, he said, not an operational plan. Did you instruct your assistant to contact hospital administration? Yes. For what purpose? To understand why this had become such a spectacle. Walsh let that word hang, spectacle. Then he asked the question that split the room open. Mr. Vale, when you looked at that ambulance, what exactly did you think was happening inside it? Sebastian frowned. I assumed a patient needed care. What kind of patient? I don't know. Did you imagine a child? I didn't think in those terms. Walsh didn't move. That, he said, is the point. Sebastian's face tightened. Now the courtroom wasn't angry. It was watching for the first sign of humanity. Judge Caprio spoke. Mr. Vale, how old are you? 43. Where did you grow up? There was a strange pause, as if Sebastian wasn't sure why this mattered. South Providence. Parents. My mother raised me. What did she do? Sebastian's answer came flatter than the others. Laundry services, nights mostly. Something flickered across Caprio's expression. Not surprise, recognition of terrain. And did you always live as you do now? No. Did you ever need hospitals when you were young? Kessler stood. Your Honor, relevance. Caprio looked at him. I'm assessing the witness. Kessler sat. Sebastian shifted his weight. My mother was sick when I was a kid. With what? Lupus, kidney issues later. So you spent time in emergency rooms? Yes. Another pause. Then you know what a siren means. The sentence was so quiet it barely seemed spoken, but it landed harder than any accusation so far. Sebastian opened his mouth, then closed it. Caprio didn't press, not yet. The hearing recessed for 10 minutes. That recess felt longer than some people's marriages. The gallery buzzed in whispers. Nobody left. Not really. A few stepped into the hall for water, but most stayed seated, afraid the room might breathe without them and they would miss it. Diane Marino stacked files. Bailiff Tom Keegan, retired Navy, broad as a doorway, stood near the bench with his arms folded. Officer Ruiz drank from a paper cup and stared at nothing. Jamal Green stretched his back slowly. Maria Santos sat with both hands around a tissue she wasn't using. Sebastian stood near the side wall with Kessler, speaking low and fast. The confidence was still there, but now it had static in it. He kept glancing toward the door as if an exit might appear if he looked hard enough. What nobody knew then was that the next hour would transform not just the case, but the man standing at its center. Hit that subscribe button if you can already feel the collision coming. Because some courtroom moments are about punishment, but the unforgettable ones are about the exact second a person sees himself clearly for the first time and realizes he doesn't like the view. When court resumed, Walsh introduced one final piece of evidence. The full unedited surveillance sequence from camera E4 synchronized with body cam audio and intake logs. Longer footage, more context, no convenient cuts. Caprio allowed it. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen glowed. This time the video began 1 minute earlier before the Bentley pulled up. Rain drifting in silver lines through the hospital floodlights, staff entering and exiting, a father carrying a sleeping toddler, a nurse wheeling out a sealed biohazard bin. Ordinary emergency department life, which is to say, ordinary crisis. Then the Bentley arrived again. But now, with the extra minute, something else became clear. The red-striped lane wasn't vaguely marked. It screamed its purpose. White stenciled letters on the curb, vertical reflective signs, even a painted ambulance icon near the front wheel stop. Nobody in that courtroom could pretend otherwise after seeing it in motion. The valet hurried over sooner than before. He pointed twice. Sebastian shook his head before the valet even finished speaking. He checked his phone. Body cam audio had not started yet, but the security camera caught enough of the physical exchange to tell a story. Impatience, dismissal, the valet stepping back. Then came a detail nobody had mentioned. A woman exiting the hospital with a walker had to angle around the Bentley's rear end and off the curb because the car partially narrowed her accessible path. Her daughter steadied her. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. But 4 seconds can say a lot. Walsh didn't comment on it. He didn't need to. The room saw. Then the synchronized audio came in. Siren growing. Officer Ruiz arriving. Sebastian's line about the ambulance going around. The ambulance stopping wrong. Jamal and Priya unloading Lily. Then the camera angle caught something from farther back than anyone expected. Inside the ambulance, before the rear doors fully opened, you could hear Lily. Faint, thin, terrified. "Mom!" That single word threaded through the room like a blade. Mei Chen bowed her head. Maria covered her mouth. Even Tom Keegan, the bailiff who looked carved from oak, blinked hard and looked down. Then the medics rushed the stretcher. Maria came toward the door. She slipped. The wheel hit the curb edge. Jamal adjusted. Priya shouted for respiratory support. Officer Ruiz yelled again for the vehicle owner to move. And then Sebastian entered frame, not running to help, not apologizing, but standing with one hand on the open driver's door while arguing about how long he'd been there. The clip froze there at Walsh's request. It was the worst possible frame. Bentley glossy under flashing lights, child in distress, staff in motion, one man blocking the geometry of urgency and still behaving as though the central injustice was that he had been spoken to sharply. That, Walsh said, is what this case is. No rhetoric, no flourish, just that. Kessler rose and tried to salvage something. He argued emotion had overwhelmed proportionality. He stressed again that nobody alleged deliberate intent to hurt. He reminded the court that Sebastian had no prior municipal record beyond minor parking citations. He noted his philanthropy, his local business contributions, his tax base, his foundation scholarship program for Rhode Island students. Caprio listened to all of it. Then he asked Sebastian if he wished to add anything before the court considered disposition. And that is where everything detonated. Sebastian stood slowly. His face had changed from smug to strained, but strain is not humility, not automatically. Sometimes it is just ego under pressure. He looked first at Walsh, then at May, then at Jamal, and finally at Judge Caprio. With respect, he said, and the phrase now sounded like a habit instead of a feeling, this court keeps framing me as if I looked at a child and chose harm. That is not what happened. What happened is that people saw my car, saw my name, and decided they had found a symbol. I understand why that's attractive. I'm successful. I'm visible. I'm easy to resent. A murmur rose. Tom Keegan said, "Order," without needing to raise his voice much. Sebastian continued, and now the sharpness came back. The room recognized it immediately. I built companies from nothing. I employ hundreds of people. I pay more in taxes in a year than most of the people in this room will ever see. I have donated more money to Providence Memorial than some of these critics will earn in 10 lifetimes. So yes, maybe I expected a little perspective before being publicly paraded over a mistake. His eyes were bright now, not with tears, with anger. Then he said the sentence that would define the hearing forever. "Do you have any idea who I am?" People later disagreed about whether he meant Judge Caprio specifically, the room generally, or the whole city. It didn't matter, because the answer came so fast, so clean, so devastatingly calm, that for a second it felt like the air itself had been cut in half. "Irrelevant," Judge Caprio said. One word. That was it. Not loud, not theatrical, not barked. Just placed in the room with perfect precision. Irrelevant. The courtroom froze. No papers moved. No one coughed. Even the radiator seemed to stop hissing. Diane Marino looked up over her glasses. Officer Ruiz's expression didn't change, but something softened in it. Mei Chen stared at the bench. Jamal's jaw unclenched. Maria Santos shut her eyes as if she had been waiting all morning for anyone, to say exactly that. And Sebastian Vale, a man who had spent years building an identity large enough to enter every room before him, got hit by a truth he could not negotiate with. Irrelevant. Who he was, irrelevant. What he owned, irrelevant. What he donated, irrelevant. How loudly he believed in himself, irrelevant. All the usual scaffolding failed at once. That is why everyone later said they never forgot the sound of that word, because it didn't just shut him down, it stripped the case to its moral bones. Like this video if that one word hit you as hard as it hit the courtroom, because some replies don't just answer a question, they end an illusion. Caprio let the silence work a few seconds longer. Then he spoke. "Mr. Vale, in this courtroom, I do not measure people by what they own, what they donate, or hat they can afford to lose. I measure conduct. You ask whether I know who you are, I know enough. I know that when a siren sounded, you treated urgency as inconvenience. I know a child struggled to breathe while you debated your own comfort. I know a working woman was injured trying to reduce the damage of your decision. I know an EMT strained his back because a path meant to be clear was blocked by your confidence. And I know that after all of it, your first instinct was not reflection. It was influence." Each sentence landed deeper than the last. "You want perspective," Caprio continued. "Here it is. A siren means someone else's worst day has begun. When you stand in its way, you are not important. You are in the way." Quote number 4. Nobody in the room would ever forget it. Sebastian tried to speak. "Your Honor, I..." Caprio raised one hand slightly, not dismissive, absolute. "No, listen." There it was again. Another one-word command, not the famous one, but almost as powerful because of what came after. "You built success. Fine. Many people do, good for you. But success that teaches a man he can ignore ordinary boundaries is not success. It is corrosion. Money can buy comfort, it cannot purchase innocence." Quote number 5. Sebastian's face changed. This time it wasn't anger. It was recognition beginning to hurt. Judge Caprio looked toward the witness row. "Ms. Chen," he said gently, "would your daughter's statement be appropriate to read, Or would you prefer it remain in the file? May hesitated, then nodded. It can be read. Diane Marino unfolded a handwritten page, pink paper, blue ink. The handwriting was careful, slanted, still young. My name is Lily Chen. I am 14 years old. I play violin and I want to become a doctor because doctors helped me when I was little. On June 22, when I was in the ambulance, I got scared because I could not breathe and the ambulance stopped. I thought maybe I did something wrong. My mom kept saying, "You're okay, you're okay." But she was crying, so I knew I was not okay. I remember seeing a black car and thinking rich people must have different parking rules. After I got better, I asked my mom if that was true. She said no. I hope she is right. By the time Diane finished reading, the room had changed shape. Not physically, emotionally. There are moments when a child says one honest thing, and every adult in earshot has to decide whether the world deserves them. I remember seeing a black car and thinking rich people must have different parking rules. That was the sentence. That was the one that made Sebastian look down. For the first time all morning, he seemed unable to find the room's center. Walsh might have stopped there and still won everything he came for. But life, unlike tidy storytelling, often brings more. Caprio asked if either side had anything further, and Maria Santos slowly raised her hand from the front row. It was irregular, unexpected, but Caprio allowed her to speak from counsel table without recalling her formally to the stand. Maria took a step forward. "There is one thing," she said. Her voice was soft, the kind that makes people lean in because missing it would feel like losing something. When His Honor asked where Mr. Vale grew up, South Providence, and he said his mother worked nights in laundry services, I kept thinking that sounded familiar. Sebastian looked up. Maria turned toward him, studying his face not with anger now, but with a searching sadness that felt somehow worse. "Your mother's name," she said, "was it Teresa Vale?" The courtroom stilled again. Sebastian blinked. "Yes." Maria nodded slowly, as if a puzzle piece had slid into place 30 years late. "I knew your mother." The words hit like a second trial, opening inside the first. Sebastian stared at her. "That's impossible," he said, but it came out too fast and too weak. Maria's eyes had gone glassy. "No, it's not. Teresa worked laundry at Providence Memorial in the 90s. Thin woman, pretty smile. Always smelled a little like detergent and peppermint. She used to keep cough drops in her apron pocket. She got very sick one winter. You were a little boy, maybe 9, maybe 10. You used to sit in the waiting area by the vending machines with a red toy car." Sebastian's expression emptied. People in the gallery looked from Maria to Sebastian, and back again like they were watching memory become evidence. Maria went on. "One night she was taken in through emergency. You were alone for a while because your aunt was driving in from Cranston. You were crying but trying not to. I sat with you. I bought you hot chocolate from the machine that always made it too watery." A tiny sound escaped Sebastian. Not a word, just disbelief cracking. Maria pressed one hand over her brace with the other. "You kept saying you didn't want your mother to see you scared because she had enough pain already." Mei Chen began crying quietly. Officer Ruiz looked down at the table. "Jamal." Green turned his face away. Maria took one careful breath. "I remember because your mother thanked me 2 weeks later when she came back for labs. She said, 'My boy thinks brave means quiet.' And I told her brave sometimes means letting someone help you." The room was gone now. Not literally. But whatever distance had existed between the millionaire and the people he hurt had just been obliterated by a paper cup of watery hot chocolate from 30 years earlier. Sebastian's hands trembled. Just slightly. But enough. He started. "I don't remember that." Maria nodded. "I didn't expect you to." Then came the forgiveness twist nobody saw coming. I'm not saying it to shame you, she said. I'm saying it because I need you to understand what this looked like to me that night. I saw a child coming in scared, and I ran because that's what people did for your mother. That's what people did for you. There are sentences that do not accuse. They simply reveal the canyon between who someone has become and who they once were. That was one of them. Sebastian sat down without being told to. His face had gone pale, not embarrassment, something deeper, the body recognizing impact before the mind has caught up. Drop a comment if that twist got you, because the very woman he ignored in the rain had once cared for him when he was a frightened boy, and suddenly the story was no longer rich versus poor. It was memory versus ego, humanity versus amnesia. Caprio spoke carefully now because he understood the room stood at a threshold. Push too hard and shame hardens. Guide rightly and it can break open. Mr. Vale, he said, do you need a moment? Sebastian shook his head once, then again less sure. No, he said. But his voice no longer believed itself. Caprio waited. This was the discipline people underestimated in him. He knew when to speak. He also knew when to let another person hear the echo of their own choices without interruption. Sebastian finally stood again. No buttoning of the jacket this time. No gesture choreography. No polished cadence. My mother, he said, then stopped. He swallowed hard. My mother spent a lot of time in that hospital. I remember the smell, bleach, coffee, wet coats in winter. I remember the vending machines. He looked at Maria like he was trying to see through time. I don't remember you, he said quietly, but I believe you. Maria nodded once. Sebastian's jaw tightened, but now it was the effort of not falling apart in public. When you said that line about brave meaning quiet, he let out a breath that shook. That sounds like her. Nobody moved. I told myself for years, he went on, that I built everything so I would never be powerless like that again. Never be the kid waiting for adults to decide whether his mother got seen fast enough. Never be dependent on somebody else's mercy. Then came the breakthrough. I think somewhere along the way, I stopped being afraid of being ignored and became the person doing the ignoring. No one in that courtroom would later remember the exact order of the next few seconds, only the feeling. Sebastian reaching for the edge of the table, Kessler half rising, unsure whether to intervene. Diane Marino taking off her glasses, May covering her mouth, the sound of one hard breath turning into another. Then Sebastian Vale cried. Not neatly, not cinematically, not one stoic tear rolling down the face of a redeemed man. He bent forward like the body could no longer hold the version of him that had walked in that morning. I heard the siren, he said, voice breaking. I heard it and I thought about my meeting, my donation, my schedule, my car, everything except the person inside that ambulance. I did that. I did that. Caprio said nothing. Sebastian turned first to Mei Chen. I am sorry. Then to Jamal. I am sorry. Then to Maria, and this was the hardest one. I am ashamed that you had to remind me who I used to be. Maria cried too now. The whole room seemed to exhale together. But Judge Caprio was not finished. Compassion in a courtroom means nothing if it skips truth. He knew that. Mercy without accountability is sentiment. Accountability without mercy is theater. He was aiming for something rarer. Mr. Vale, he said, an apology matters, but apology is the first brick, not the house. Sebastian nodded, eyes red. Caprio continued. The court finds that you knowingly obstructed an emergency access lane, failed to comply promptly with a direct lawful order, and acted afterward in a way that suggests not reflection, but attempted influence. Those are serious failures of judgment. The law does not bow because a wallet is heavy. Quote number 6. He paused. However, the court is also interested in what justice can build after it names what went wrong. Everybody leaned in again, because now they sensed something unusual, not leniency, not exactly, something more demanding than that. Caprio asked Maria, Jamal, and May to remain. He asked Ed Sebastian to step forward. Then he laid out what he called a sentence of consequence and repair, blending formal penalties with restorative conditions under city supervision. First, the maximum municipal fines on the citations. No reduction, no charitable credit, no donor discount, full amount payable within 30 days. Second, restitution through a civil agreement already being prepared by the parties for Maria Santos's lost wages and medical costs, with additional reimbursement for Jamal Green's documented treatment expenses, if not fully covered by insurance. Third, a public written apology, not drafted by a public relations firm, to be filed with the court and delivered privately to the affected parties. Fourth, and this was the part that made the room sit straighter, Sebastian Vale would complete 26 consecutive Saturdays of supervised service at Providence Memorial's Family Support Wing and Emergency Intake Hospitality Desk from 6:00 a.m. to noon, beginning within 2 weeks. No photographers, no press releases, no foundation branding, no naming rights. If he failed to appear without verified cause, the court would refer the matter for additional sanctions and publicly note noncompliance. Then Caprio added one more condition. Sebastian would fund, through an anonymous trust administered by the city and hospital together, improved emergency lane barriers and signage at Providence Memorial, including retractable bollards and updated painted guidance markers, with no public credit attached to his name. Kessler opened his mouth, perhaps to negotiate something. Caprio's look stopped him. "This is not philanthropy," the judge said. "It is repair." Quote number 7. The gallery was utterly silent. Then came the unexpected mercy moment. Maria raised her hand again. "Your Honor," she said, "may I ask one thing?" Caprio nodded. "If he does the Saturdays," she said, "I don't want him hidden in an office. Put him where families sit. Let him hand out blankets. Let him answer where the coffee machine is. Let him hear the questions scared people ask." Caprio looked at Sebastian. "Do you accept that condition?" "Yes," Sebastian said immediately. Maria looked at him through tears. "I don't need your money to remember you," she said. "I need your time." That was quote number 8. And it hit harder than any punishment. Like this video if you believe that line belongs in the history of courtroom moments. I don't need your money to remember you. I need your time. That wasn't revenge. That was wisdom sharp enough to change a life. Caprio gave Sebastian one last chance to speak. He did, but now every sentence felt stripped down to what mattered. "I accept the fines," he said. "I accept every condition. I will complete them. I will not send someone else. I will not turn it into publicity. And for whatever it is worth, I understand now that what I did was not a mistake in parking. It was a failure in character." Then he turned, unexpectedly, to the gallery. "I spent a long time thinking success meant never having to wait, never having to ask, never having to feel small again. I was wrong. All that did was make me blind to people who had less room to absorb my selfishness." Quote number 9. There are times when a room believes someone because of how they speak. This was not one of them. The room believed him, or began to, because of how different his voice sounded from an hour earlier. The slickness was gone. So was the contempt. In its place was the roughness of a man hearing himself honestly for the first time in years. Caprio nodded once. "Then let your actions become your argument." Quote number 10. He struck the gavel lightly. And just like that, resolution began. But if you think that's where the story ends, that's where most people miss what made this case unforgettable. Because the famous word, the tears, the sentence, all of that would have made the hearing memorable. What made it powerful was what happened after the cameras stopped talking and the clips started circulating. Yes, clips circulated. Of course they did. Someone in the courtroom hallway described the moment to a local producer. A short segment on the evening news ran under the banner "Donor confronted in court over Hospital Lane block." Then a longer cut made its way online. Not the entire hearing, but enough. Sebastian's question. Judge Caprio's one-word reply. Maria's revelation. The sentence about a siren meaning someone else's worst day. Within 48 hours, the video had crossed 1 million views across different reposts. People called it the most talked-about Providence courtroom moment in years. But virality is cheap if nothing changes after it. This did. 2 weeks later at 5:53 on a Saturday morning, before sunrise had fully found the city, a volunteer coordinator named Heather Mullins unlocked the family support room at Providence Memorial and saw a man standing outside with a plain gray sweatshirt, black jeans, and no watch on his wrist. Sebastian Vale. No driver, no assistant, no Bentley. He drove himself there in a dark blue Ford Explorer registered to his company's fleet services. Not flashy, not hidden either. He carried a box of individually wrapped granola bars in one arm and looked like a person discovering how different the world feels when nobody parts for you. Heather later wrote in her compliance report that he arrived 8 minutes early, asked where to stand, and listened all the way through orientation without interrupting once. His first task was simple: refill blanket carts, stack bottled water, show waiting family members where the pediatric respiratory consult room was located, explain the difference between intake desks, point them toward vending machines. Nothing glamorous, nothing worthy of a gala speech. At 7:14 a.m., according to the log, he helped an elderly man with a cane carry a bag to radiology check-in. At 8:02, he sat with a father from Pawtucket whose 5-year-old son had split his chin open on a coffee table. The father kept apologizing for asking where the restrooms were. Sebastian reportedly said, "You don't have to apologize for needing help." Heather wrote that down because his voice cracked when he said it. At 9:37, he handed tissues to a woman crying beside a vending machine because her mother had been taken for scans and nobody had updated her in 35 minutes. And at 10:18, he met Lily Chen. That part mattered. The hospital had not arranged it as spectacle. In fact, they tried to avoid overlap. But Lily had a follow-up respiratory appointment that morning. May later said when she saw Sebastian in the family room, she nearly turned around and left. Then Lily touched her sleeve and said, "No, it's okay. I want to see if he looks different." He did. Not because he dressed down. Anybody can do costume humility. He looked different because he met their eyes and did not try to outrun the discomfort in his own. According to May's later letter to the court, Sebastian stood when they entered, looked at Lily and said, "You were right. Your mom was right. Rich people should not have different rules." Lily, being 14 and therefore more direct than most adults, asked, "Do you actually believe that now, or are you saying it because the judge scared you?" Heather almost dropped a clipboard when she heard it. Sebastian, to his credit, answered honestly. "Both," he said, "but I'm trying to become the kind of person who believes it even when no judge is watching." That line made it into May's letter too. Drop a comment if you think that answer was the real sign of change. Not perfection, not polished redemption, just uncomfortable honesty. Over the next 6 months, the reports kept coming. Not dramatic reports, better than dramatic, consistent. Week 3 arrived early, cleaned coffee spill near support desk before anyone asked, stayed 12 minutes late to help locate a discharged patient's ride. Week 5 completed training module on hospital privacy and family communication, asked whether he could donate snacks anonymously after being told the room's supply budget ran thin by the end of each month. Hospital administration approved only if done through general inventory with no acknowledgement placard. He agreed. Week 8 assisted during a storm surge of ER admissions, mostly by guiding families from overflow seating to triage overflow. Heather wrote, Mr. Vale is quieter, less performative, appears affected by pediatric cases. Week 11, Maria Santos encountered